And hi, everybody. I'm Leslie with New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and we're here with Christopher Garcia for basic steps to starting a business. He also does e-commerce and alternative selling methods, which we just got finished with. I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions at all, please type them into the Q&A, and he will have plenty of opportunity at the end to answer all the questions that come in. I also want to remind everyone that the New Mexico Small Business Development Center wants to remind all New Mexico businesses that we care about your cybersecurity. We also want you to be aware of taking steps to ensure that, especially against ransomware. So we have added cybersecurity webinars for June. We still have signups available. You do need to hit the deadline 24 hours before the webinar when the webinar signups close. But coming up, top 10 mistakes hackers want you to make, which I want to know that. I want to know the top 10. And then also we have coming up cybersecurity basic steps to protecting your business. So I want to remind everyone to sign up for the no-cost webinars that we have. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Leslie. Thanks for putting me in the right webinar. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Basic Steps to Starting a Business webinar. My name is Christopher Garcia, and I'm the Business Development Specialist at the SBDC at UNM Valencia campus. And we created this webinar off of a great document on our website called the Basic Steps to Starting a Business. My contact information is on this slide, and a PDF of the slides and the links that I talk about will be emailed to you after the presentation. In fact, I will show it this follow-up email to you right now, just so you know it's coming. And I think there might be a few links that are old, but if I'm not able to get to them off the slideshow, I will chat them to everybody during our presentation. And here are your plethora of links, and then there is a PDF of the webinar slides. Let's return to our slideshow. Perfect. And this, I want to tell you all, this is my favorite webinar to do, the one I have most expertise in, and I'm happy to present it to you today. Before we begin, let's go over some webinar ground rules. Everyone on the call right now is muted, so don't worry about background noise. And there's a feature to raise your hand, and I'll use that feature throughout the presentation. In fact, if you can hear me and see my slides, would you raise your hand for me just so I know we're doing good off the get-go? Oh, good. This group's good. Perfect. I'm going to lower everybody's hand. And if you have any questions for me, please type them into the Q&A and I'll answer them after the presentation. And I want to right now ask everybody who was able to put a hi, hello, how are you into the Q&A, just so I know everybody knows how to use it. Hello, Don. Hello, Rose. Hello, Megan. Hi, Garrett. Hi, David. Perfect, perfect. I think I don't have to worry about anybody on the webinar today. Let me get rid of it. And hello, Vandever. And then let me look at the chat. You are welcome to put your questions in the chat, but I might miss them, so please put them in the Q&A if possible. And hello, Chantel. Perfect. And the slides are all numbered, so if you want to revisit a slide, please put the slide number in the Q&A. Let's go to the next slide. Here is a graphic of our center locations throughout New Mexico. And the mission of the SBDC is to build skilled entrepreneurs and strong businesses by offering no-cost confidential business counseling and lower no-cost webinars like this one. And I'm going to tell you about the SBDC in the next few slides. Before I go on, I want you to notice the powered by the SBA logo at the bottom of our screen. We are funded in part by the Small Business Administration and the state of New Mexico. So whenever you take one of these webinars or participate in our counseling, remember it is your tax dollars at work. This slide includes 3 topics for upcoming trainings. And this is a little bit dated, so I want to turn it over to Leslie if you're available to discuss some upcoming training events.
Sure, I'd be glad to, because we have quite a few. And so I updated everyone on the 2 cybersecurity ones that are coming up. Also, we still have registration is still available for Intellectual Pirates Part 2 coming up. Registration does close at 12 o'clock today on that. Part 1 is going to be available on demand, pre-recorded. So you can hop on to Part 2, but then again, you can also, after you get done with that, you can go back and watch the Part 1 that we had earlier this week. Also coming up, your most important online stat you cannot ignore. This one is really going to be interesting. We have a great presenter for that. Then going into early next week, we have, should my business be accepting cryptocurrency? Also, we have putting your digital best foot forward. First impressions matter. We have a mental health for your small business, mental and physical health for your small business, and top 10 mistakes hackers want you to make. And it looks like we may have lost Chris. So let me get into let me give him a chance to pop back on. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up his presentation. We'll give him just a minute to see if he comes back on. I don't know where Chris is. So just a sec. Oh, here comes Chris. Let me make him a co-host again. I'm not sure what happened. Chris, yeah, there you are.
There I am, I'm back. I think our connection, it's noontime. So I think everybody and their mother's on the computer right now. So I think we just took up too much bandwidth.
Well, luckily I have enough to talk about to fill. So sorry about that. Okay, turning over to you.
Thank you, Leslie. So here's an agenda for today's training. I'm going to tell you more about the SBDC, talk to you about our pre and post surveys for this training, get into the basic steps, and review and demonstrate our excellent research tools. And then I'll take questions in the Q&A. I'll also ask you to show your hands during the presentation just to make sure everything's flowing. And in fact, when I do this webinar, I always like to ask those of you who are from central New Mexico, so from the group, who is here from central New Mexico? So that's the Albuquerque metro area. If you would raise your hand for me, just so I know where you're from. Perfect. Most of us are here from the central New Mexico area. How about the northwest area? So we're thinking Farmington area. Wow, okay, good. Thanks for joining us all the way from that area today. How about from the northeast? So Clayton. Nobody from the Great Plains area. Oh, I see one. Thanks for joining us today. How about Southwest? So Silver City. Nobody from the Southwest. How about the Southeast? Any aliens joining us from the Roswell area? Okay, good. I'm catering to the top part of New Mexico today. I want to welcome you all. Now let's talk about the services of the SBDC. We offer two major services, confidential business counseling and lower no-cost business training. And there are no limits to how much no-cost counseling you can receive or how many no-cost trainings you can attend. We have centers throughout New Mexico, so there'll be one close to you. And if you look at the graphic in the upper right-hand corner, it shows what we do. We renew, grow, launch, and start up small businesses. This slide shows what we expect from our clients. My fellow business advisors and directors want you to succeed, so you'll be assigned homework or further research, so please do the network necessary to succeed. We can't make decisions for you or offer tax or legal advice. We can only connect you to the information you need to make educated decisions. And part of making educated decisions is working with licensed professionals like attorneys and accountants. Next, I want to remind you about important surveys we send out as part of attending these trainings. Everyone who registered for this webinar received an email from Leslie Everson saying, in anticipation of the upcoming Basic Steps to Starting a Business in New Mexico event that you registered for, we'd like to collect some preliminary information from you. With this information in hand, we can tailor the materials to better fit your needs. And I want to do a show of hands. How many of you received that email? Oh, good. About half of you received it. So I'm guessing I should see at least 10 surveys completed. So if you haven't done those already, be sure to do them. If you haven't received your pre-webinar evaluation, please reach out to Leslie or me. And you'll receive a survey of this webinar after, maybe about a day or two after. So please do that one because it's important for our funding. And it's important to get your feedback so we could tailor these trainings to meet your needs. And we won't know what your needs are unless you do the surveys. Very good. Now let's talk about starting a business in New Mexico. Before going into business, there are some important considerations you must think about. Will I make enough money to live? Will this replace my current income? Do I need the benefits offered by my current employer, like retirement plans, medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, or other important benefits? Can you replace those benefits by starting your business? You must also think about your educational background and skills. You have the correct educational background and skills to understand and operate the many facets of a business. This includes bookkeeping, accounting, human resources, supply chain management, sales, and that's just to name a few. If not, you may need to hire someone to perform these tasks or take further training or training events like this one. And if you haven't started your business already, if you have already, this is a great webinar for you as well. But I'm catering to those who have yet to start their business. And a great document on our website is the Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur Guide. And my links aren't behaving with me today. But there's always more than one way to skin a cat. Oh, we transitioned to our new website. So we're not gonna, we don't have that link's not working correctly. And we just transitioned to this new website. We love it. And they changed the name of the guide to How to Tell If You're an Entrepreneur Test. We love to change titles around these parts. So let me chat over this link to everybody. I'm glad we were able to identify that it is not still a valid link. Let me go to let me make a note that I have to change this link. So I send it to you correctly in the follow-up email. But I chatted that link over now, and this is a great test to evaluate your skills as an entrepreneur. There's a 1 through 7 rating or a 0 through 7 rating. Gives you a little bit about myths and misconceptions, identifying some startup ideas, feasibility analysis, which is really one of my specialties as an advisor. So I love to help prepare business plans. Estimating the cost of a startup, and we do have some great software that's proprietary to the Small Business Development Center that helps create a set of financial projections. And for those of you on the call who would like to apply for a small business loan, you will need to provide the lender with at least 2 years of financial projections. This helps you gather your personal living expenses to make sure you could cover those as a business owner, or cover those in a loan until you can get started. Has some great examples of business operating costs, a recap of costs, and the article on which this webinar is based, the basic steps to starting a business. We'll go through all 13 steps today. And then on the back of this document are links to some of the agencies you need to contact as an entrepreneur. Let's get back to our slideshow. And now that I look at this, I'm thinking most of my links are not going to be good since we started our new, or we transitioned to our new website. So bear with me. Let's now go through the steps one by one. These slides will be emailed to all attendees, so don't worry about writing down web addresses. And step 1 is defining the business. This is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And these questions are answered in a business plan. And if you need a business loan, you must provide the business plan to a lender. Many centers use a fill-in-the-blank template that I'll email to you after this presentation, and that's not a link to our website, so that will be in there as a correct link. But there are many options for creating a business plan, like online software such as LivePlan. The Small Business Administration has a great online learning platform, and they have a module with about 50 little small 2 or 3 minute videos about writing a business plan, and they offer a sample financial statements. I also want to point you towards the New Mexico Economic Development one-stop website for starting a business. That's the gonm.biz. And right now, their big thing right now is getting everybody vaccinated, because and a lot of people don't know how that pertains to business, but the more people we get vaccinated, the better we could lower the rating system for closures and different COVID-related operations we have to do. So just remind you, the more vaccinations we get, the lower we could get in the totem pole of the system, and the less restrictions we have. So it benefits everybody, mostly business owners. And this is what the EDD website looks like. The areas that I want to show you today are under business development and New Mexico EDD programs for business. So when you get into this, there's a lot of great graphics, and the ones I want to cover today are the Job Training Incentive Program and the programs under finance development. So let me go to the Job Training Incentive Program, or JTIP, as we most commonly call it. And if you are somebody who wants to start a business or grow a business in New Mexico, the JTIP program allows you to get a reimbursement for the time training employees in these certain industries. So a non-retail service companies that export a substantial percent of services out of state, we like to call these economic-based employers. Certain green industries and companies that manufacture or produce products in New Mexico. These are the industries this program's catered to. If you hire, I don't know, 5, 10 people, for every 5 people you hire, you could train one and you could get reimbursement for one administrative or creative position. And it gives you a little bit about training eligibility, a little bit about reimbursements. And this is a great program for those wishing to start something in manufacturing or economic-based production. or being in a green industry in New Mexico, and you could get up to from between 50 and 85% of wages reimbursed for that training. So take advantage of that program if you're eligible. We're going to visit the programs again. I want to go to finance development. And I want to talk to you about the first one, which is LEDA. LEDA stands for the Local Economic Development Act. And what LEDA is it's a pot of money at the state level. So the legislator put, I believe at one time it was $12 million into a pot of money that they could grant to municipalities if they help. And it's usually an economic-based employer, a manufacturer, somebody in a green industry. This program also goes into agricultural producers. If you wanted to start or grow that type of business, especially in a rural or underserved area in New Mexico, the state could grant that municipality money to reimburse you for things like building equipment and improvements to a building. And it goes into the specs on the website. So if you're interested in that, just take a look. Next, I want to talk to you about the Collateral Assistance Program, because this is a great program as well. So say you want to start one of those businesses we've talked about before, and this has much less criteria than the other programs. So really, most businesses qualify. And say you're wanting to build a metal building, you're going to use it to warehouse stuff to sell online. But you could inject $50,000 into the project, but you need a loan of $250,000. And the portion that isn't collateral backed would be a problem for the bank. So these are things like organizational fees, working capital, pretty much your current expenses. If you have a gap between what you're able to provide collateral for and those uncollateral backed expenses, and a bank will give you a loan if you can provide collateral, the Collateral Assistance Program is a good resource for you. Inventory is another thing that's not collateral backed. And one of my favorite programs, the one I like to talk most about, are opportunity zones. And what opportunity zones are, they're zones in New Mexico designated as low economic outcome, high probability of growth of zones, basically places that the state of New Mexico wants to introduce businesses and commerce into. And this works very well for those who want to do affordable housing, agricultural projects, manufacturing projects, and economic-based projects. But there's no specific criteria. You could do a retail space, you could do a gas station, you could do all kinds of stuff in these opportunity zones. And I will zoom into Valencia County a little bit more, since most of us are here from the rural, from the metro area. So what are these zones and why would they apply to a new business? Well, these zones are created so you could better get investment funding from an opportunity fund. So what an opportunity fund does is it takes capital gains taxes that rich individuals or successful businesses would have to pay to the IRS. They allow them to defer that tax payment if they give that money to an opportunity fund. In turn, that opportunity fund has to invest working capital into projects in the areas outlined in orange. The ones outlined in purple are usually public-private partnership projects, like solar farms on the Laguna Pueblo or affordable housing in Isla de Pueblo. And it just helps you better connect with investors. It makes money freer for those average Joes wanting to seek capital investment to get it through an opportunity fund. The incentive for those providing money to an opportunity fund is they could defer or avoid paying capital gains taxes until they sell the portion of the business that they own, and you get the investment sooner than later. So if you want more information about that, definitely reach out to me or reach out to the Economic Development Department, because those are underutilized programs in New Mexico designed for minorities women, veterans, Native Americans who want to start small businesses, maybe can't get all the funding they need from a lender and might want to seek a venture capital. Perfect. Let me get rid of my remote controls. Perfect. Step 2 is to choose a business name, and there are legal considerations when choosing a business name, and it's very important to find a name that resonates with your target market, looks good on websites, social media, business cards, and other marketing material, is easy to spell and pronounce, and isn't trademarked or copywritten by another business. And I like to use this example. There was a restaurant in Albuquerque called Dee's Cheesecake Factory. And if you grew up in Albuquerque, this was probably one of your favorite places for lunch or a sweet treat. The owners of Dee's Cheesecake Factory started this business after World War II and trademarked the name in the state of New Mexico. Fast forward to 2010, there's a national chain called The Cheesecake Factory that wants to do business in New Mexico. And if you've been to the Coronado Mall in Albuquerque, you've probably seen the Cheesecake Factory. But they could not operate a restaurant in New Mexico with the name Cheesecake Factory because the savvy business owners at Dee's reserved the name many years before. In this example, the small business had the upper hand, but you can imagine how a small business operating under a trademark business name could end up being sued, have to change their business name and all their expensive marketing material, and it could actually destroy a new business. So be very careful. There are 2 types of trademarks. There's a state and a federal trademark. And the first website on the screen is for the United States Patent and Trademark Office. The second is for the New Mexico Secretary of State's office. These are the 2 agencies responsible for registering trademarks. And since we can't provide legal advice, it's important for you to consult with an attorney before making a decision on a business name. I'll also show you some great resources later in the presentation for researching copyrights and trademarks, including the newest member of our team, the Technology Commercialization Accelerator at New Mexico's Tech, staffed by Estefanita Rawlings. Okay, step 3 is choosing and registering your legal structure. The legal structure of your business is its foundation, and you must carefully consider how you wish to legally operate your business. And this has a lot of personal tax connotations along with it, so it's best to consult with your certified public accountant when making this decision. The common business structures are on the slide. Everything but sole proprietorships must be registered with the New Mexico Secretary of State's office, and the paperwork is available online. More information about legal structures can be found in the document called Basics of Choosing a Business Entity on our website. Fingers crossed it's the same link. If not, I will go to my slideshow. Oh, and we changed the name. It's How to Choose a Business Entity now. It's on our website. I'm going to chat over this link just to make sure everybody on the call right now has it. And I'm going to make a note to change this link in my follow-up email. And this document was put together by an attorney, and it goes over the pros and cons of each. It goes over the law under which you're governed as a business owner. It goes over the pros and cons and the description of most of the common organizational structures. And I always see this, and I see DBA, and that's called a doing business as name. The Secretary of State's office does not have a formal structure for registering doing business as names. So the only way you could legally register a business name in the state of New Mexico is to incorporate. And that would be creating a limited liability company, a corporation, so on and so forth. I also put a link to the to information about B Corps. This link should work because it's not on our website. And B Corps, also known as benefit corporations, or corporations that act that offer a social benefit. So I like to use the example of Tom's Shoes. There's Tom's Coffee, and there's a lot of other companies now that when you purchase a product, a portion of the purchase goes to a charity or nonprofit, or they're provided with a good. So in the case of Tom's Shoes, when you buy a pair of shoes, a child in Africa is provided with a pair of shoes. And that's an example of a benefits corporation. We also have one of the first benefits corporations in the United States here in New Mexico, and it's the Taos-Ski Valley. And I just like to point that out because it's a very trendy thing to do these days. It's a very interesting type of corporation, and it's a great marketing opportunity. Okay, I was just looking at the Q&A because it looked like we had a lot of questions. And I know we were a little patchy there for a little while. Now that we're having fun with paperwork, let's talk about step 4, and that's to obtain your employer identification number through the IRS. And this is the unique identification number issued to your business by the IRS and is used on all federal filings. If you're a sole proprietor, your social security number is commonly used instead of an EIN, but you could still get an EIN as a sole proprietor. And this number is just as important as your social security number and should be protected as such. There's actually more fraud that happens with an EIN number than a social security number. And those of you on the call may know how much fraud's committed with a social security number. No matter what type of business entity you choose, it's a good idea to obtain your federal employer identification number, and it's required to open up a business bank account at most banks, credit unions. You could get that through the IRS website. I also have a link for the IRS self-employed and small business tax center. It's free to apply for it. You get it the same day, and it's basically just a questionnaire. And then you get the number, you get the letter with your number on it right away. You could have it mailed to you. What's important is to be consistent on all these documents. So if you incorporate with the Secretary of State's office, use the same physical address, mailing address, phone number, and email to apply for an EIN number. Perfect. Continuing with our paperwork requirement, step 5 is to register with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to obtain a CRS-ID. You might be wondering, what is a CRS-ID used for and why do I need it? Well, it's a unique identifying number issued by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to record and track your business collection and payment of gross receipts tax, otherwise known as GRT. If GRT is a new term for you, you might recognize it as the tax you pay whenever you buy goods or services in New Mexico. It's usually around 8% and shows up at the bottom of a receipt. The online registration form is free to complete, but you may want to seek the advice of a CPA when completing the application. You must also file your gross receipts tax reports on a monthly, quarterly, or bi-yearly schedule. Therefore, the department offers a great online training, and the link is on the slide. So we're going to go to this link, and it should open because it's not on our website. And they offer workshops on gross receipts tax for new employers and new businesses. The young woman who does this webinar knows more about gross receipts tax than anybody on this call probably wishes to know in their lifetime. If you have any questions about gross receipts tax, please address them to your certified public accountant or to the presenter in this webinar. They may be able to help you much better than anybody at the SBDC. Something new that's happening, I'm going to stop sharing my screen 1 second. And I'm going to pull it up for you. We sent out this email, we created it yesterday and we sent it out today. And it has it's called the midweek update. In fact, I'm going to view it as a web page and I'm going to share this link with everybody on the call today. I'm going to chat it over. And the SBA is having a great presentation for LGBT business owners. Reminder to get the vaccines and why it's important. And if you have a larger business and want to have a vaccination clinic, you could contact Daniel Schagel at the bottom of the screen and he could do that for you. But the point I want to make about gross receipts tax is in July, how businesses calculate gross receipts tax will be significantly different. I don't even know what's going to go on. I'm going to learn with everybody else on June 23rd at 2 p.m. And anybody going into business now should take this training. And you could register at that link. I chatted over this full message to you, so be sure to do it because we're going to see how gross receipts taxes and the calculation and reporting will change. And I got a question in the chat real quick. I'll address this one because it applies directly to gross receipts taxes. And it's about people who live on a reservation, do they have to pay gross receipts? Since it's a sovereign nation, you aren't governed by New Mexico state laws, but this is the first year I've ever seen gross receipts tax rates for the Pueblos. I had never seen them before, but they have gross receipts tax rates now. That would be a good question for your tribal government, because I do think they're collecting those gross receipts taxes now. It's also a good question for your accountant or for the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. I'm not going to answer that definitively until I attend June 23rd's training, because I'm not really sure how those changes will affect the reservations. But typically they haven't in the past. The first time I've ever seen it is ending of last year, beginning of this year, that they even have gross receipts tax rates. So I'm interested to find out more. Oh, gross receipts tax rates. What a lovely topic, right? Okay. Step 6 is to obtain your local business license and other applicable licenses. And you can't do this until you get a CRS number. When doing business in New Mexico, you need a business license in the municipality or county where you have a physical presence. For instance, Teofilo's restaurant, it's here in Los Lunas, they have a physical restaurant. Because they have a physical presence in Los Lunas, they get a Village of Los Lunas business license. If they had a food truck and did business in Belen, they would have to obtain a temporary or full license in the city of Belen. Some of you might be thinking that you'll do business online or in another state. This means getting a business license in any place where you will physically conduct commerce. And if you talk about this in terms of taxes, this is called a tax nexus. Each municipality or county has different requirements for obtaining a business license. So check with the municipal or county office or consult an attorney for further advice. And I'll give you these examples. In the city of Rio Communities here in Valencia County, they ask you to sketch a floor plan of your business. Even if you're a home-based business or doing business out of your garage, they still make you sketch a floor plan. And in Socorro County, they don't have a formal business licensing process. They just have a letter on their website saying in Socorro County, you don't need a business license to operate a business. So make sure to research these things before you jump in or pick a physical location for your business. Step 7 is to report new hires to the New Mexico directory. The link to the directory is on the slide, but this brings human resource considerations into light. Human resources is a very important part of any business and comes with many legal and accounting considerations. You can always contact an accountant or an attorney for specific information, but I included links to 2 good resources for learning more about employment procedures and laws. Our partners at ComplyRight. So ComplyRight is a for-profit organization that sponsors the America's Small Business Development Conference. You don't have to buy any services from them to get access to their learning opportunities. They have e-guides, research, on-demand videos. And what ComplyRight is they're a one-stop human resource center. They provide software and subscriptions so you can get all your human resource needs met by one place. It's great for those smaller businesses, but take advantage of their knowledge base. They have great tip sheets, e-guides, research, webinars on different topics. And if you have any questions about human resources at all, take a look at this resource. There's great resources at your local library. And of course, meet with your small business advisor one-on-one. The second great guide is from the EEOC, and that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I got it right on the first try this time. And they have a small business resource center. So if you have an employee who feels they've been discriminated against by you based on one of the protected classes, race, grade, color, national origin, so on and whatnot, they will contact the EEOC, and they'll be issued. The EEOC will investigate, and you will be the person, the complainant, will be issued a right to sue letter, and that means that there might have been some discrimination happening there. So before you get one of those right to sue letters, or before you hire any employees, take a look at the tips for small business and the small business requirements. They also go into the required postings by the EEOC. A lot of companies, including ComplyRight, offer a one-stop posting requirements service where they provide you with all the required postings. All the required postings are offered for free by the Department of Workforce Solutions, the EEOC, and other agencies. So before you sign up for one of those services, just know that they're available to you for free. So those are my great human resource links. Okay. Keeping with the HR trend, step 8 is if you have employees, you may need to complete Form ES802. This is a required form from the Department of Workforce Solutions or Connections, and the Department of Workforce Solutions has many services, tax credits, and learning opportunities for small business owners. So I included their business outreach website. Here's the link to the form, pretty straightforward and dry. You also have to create an account as a new employer with the department. And pay your state tax withholdings to them, of course. But I'm going to show you their business outreach website, which is where you'd go to create an account as a new business owner. But they have a wealth of information, and I just want to cover the high points with you. Of course, they handle unemployment insurance. So all employers have to get unemployment insurance. So take a look at the information you need there. It's like a 65-page guide, you guys. So it's important that you get the information you need. The employer handbook is here. If you have to lay somebody off, you're going to have to certify as a business, I think monthly. If you're starting a new business, this will give you a primer about what you should expect from the Department of Workforce Solutions. They have an apprenticeship program and an internship opportunity for small business owners. They actually work with an agency called YDI. And if you bring somebody on from YDI, one of their youth or adults, they will pay that person to work in your business in exchange for you teaching them working skills. The biggest thing that they offer is the job postings. So people looking for a job usually go first to the Department of Workforce Solutions. They will provide a free posting for you, and that usually shows up on a lot of the websites too, like Indeed and whatnot. They have hiring incentives for people. So say you want to hire somebody who has a felony, you own a bookkeeping office, this person has an embezzlement charge in their past, they're rehabilitated because everybody does deserve a second chance. But you want to be careful. You don't know if this person will embezzle again, steal money. They will actually take out a bond for high risk employees for employers. They also offer tax credits, incentives for hiring veterans, Native Americans, people with disabilities. And then they have a program called WIOA, which is the Work Incentive Training Program, Work, WIOA. And what they do is they provide free training for those who have been out of work for a while and meet income requirements. So say you own a trucking company, you know somebody who really wants to work for you, but they don't have their CDL. If they needed to get their CDL, they could go through that WIOA program, get a CDL, all at the cost of the Workforce Solutions. And then if you hire them on, that's part of the requirements. So those are some of the great incentives offered to you by the state. Step 9 is if you have employees, seek the assistance of an accountant. You can see all the tax acronyms on the slide, and if you aren't willing or able to deal with them, please seek out a bookkeeper or an accountant. Look at those acronyms: SUDA, FUTA, FIT, SIT, FICA. Oh, it makes me want to sit. The IRS website also has a wealth of information about your federal tax obligations, and my favorite is their business taxes webinar. So if you have any questions about the taxes you're subject to as a business owner, take this webinar. If you don't have any employees, take the first 4 lessons. If you're going to have employees, take all 8 lessons. And I have this link is available in the slideshow, and then I believe I have a link to the Self-Employed Tax Center. If not, I'm going to chat it over to everybody on the call right now. So if you have any questions related to your federal tax filings, even if you're somebody doing independent contracting for a larger business, you will have tax obligations. If you participate in what they call the gig economy, and they have gig economy and sharing economy tax center right here. That includes if you have a guest house you rent out on Airbnb, if you drive for a service like Lyft or I forget the other big one, Uber, or you go pick up groceries for people with one of the third-party services, you will have tax obligations you have to take care of. And those are small businesses in themselves. And you should be very careful when entering into one of those services because there could be some hidden tax obligations you didn't know about. Perfect. Step 10 is to seek the assistance of an attorney. We talked about the important legal landmines in starting and operating a business, and attorneys are licensed to answer questions related to those. For patents and trademarks, there are 2 good resources, the New Mexico Technology Commercialization Accelerator and the New Mexico State University Patent and Trademark Resource Center. I have those, I have the link to the Resource Center here. The link to the TCA will be available later in the presentation. But if you need to consult with an attorney, and most people do, if you're starting up an LLC, you need to prepare your contracts, you need to prepare an LLC operating agreement. If you're going to go into partnership with somebody, you need to prepare a partnership agreement. And attorneys or attorney services like NOLO, Rocket Lawyer, let me see, I have to give you 3 resources: NOLO, Rocket Lawyer, and LegalZoom. Those are services that are available online that provide legal advice. But the New Mexico State Bar, or the State Bar of New Mexico, which the people in New Mexico love to change their names, have some resources for you, and let me show you those resources. These links are not working because the State Bar changed their name from the New Mexico Bar Association to the State Bar of New Mexico. Let me write a note to change those in the follow-up email, and then I'll take you there manually and I'll chat over the links. You could tell I hate when people change titles of things or website names. SBNM.org. State Bar of New Mexico.org. And if you go for the public, there are 2 great, under I Need a Lawyer, there are 2 great programs for you. There's the State Bar General Referral Service, which is a service where you pay the State Bar $35 and they use most of that money, some of that money is a donation, and then 25 of that dollars of that money is used to set up a 30-minute consultation with an attorney in your in the practice area that you're looking for. So that could be taxation, it could be employee law, so on and so forth. And if you're in a hurry to find an attorney, or you just don't know where to start, this is one of the better services for you. If you want to do a little bit more research about an attorney, you want to see all the attorneys that practice, say, employment law in Bernalillo County. They have the online bar directory, and this is a directory of everybody who's passed the bar exam in the state of New Mexico, so they're licensed to practice law here. If you're using this database on your own, I like to use 2 sections of it only, which would be county, practice county. If you're in a rural area of New Mexico or you're on the reservation, you probably have to go to the largest city near you, and then practice area. So in this, the common types of law you might need as a small business owner would be hopefully never the bankruptcy, but the business incorporation, estate planning, but not necessarily for the business. Intellectual property, that's patents and trademarks. Business names. Labor law. And taxation. So you should at least know who you could go to in any of these fields if you ever have an issue. So this will give you the names, addresses, phone numbers for those who practice law in these particular fields. And then if you, well, at random, I don't know any of these particular attorneys. If you click on their profile, they give you a name, address, phone number, and it gives you their areas of expertise and where they practice law. So this one looks like it's Santa Fe, Los Alamos, and maybe Chama, I think Chama, Española. Let's return to our slides. Oh, I said I was going to chat over that link to you. SBNM.org. Just so you all have it, and I make sure I provide it to you, and I have a note to change it in the follow-up email, but if I don't, you got it. We are on step 10. Okay. Step 11 is to review the guidelines for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. And this is another legal landmine, especially for small business owners who have a storefront or are going to hire employees. And they have great information on their website's full of information. It's hard to use, so I put that link there for you, and it takes you directly to this area where they have a primer for small business. If you're going to have employees, if you're going to have a storefront, read this primer. It might save you a lawsuit in the future, and it's a best practice to comply with ADA guidelines because they're good for everybody involved. So let's go back to our slideshow. Step 12 is to establish a business bank account, and it's best practice to keep your personal and business finances separate. This makes your bookkeeping process easier, and it'll help you if you ever experience an audit. And there are federal tax audits, state tax audits, gross receipts tax audits. So you open yourself up to a lot of audits as a small business owner. And the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC, offers a great wealth of knowledge for the small business owner. It's called Money Smart for Small Business. And if you take any module from this at all, take the one about banking services for small businesses, because they are different than personal banking, and you should really know the difference. I recommend you take all the modules for Money Smart for small business. There are about 12, and they go over different topics, like is owning a business good for. It's basically all the topics we cover in this webinar from a banker's perspective. And this was community service from the big banks during the bailout in 2008. So take advantage of it. You know, they paid a lot of money to put this curriculum together. It's offered to you for free. Need I say more? Now we are on the final step, and lucky step number 13. Our final step is to have adequate business insurance coverage. The slide shows the common types of insurance coverage, and I recommend you research your options with an independent insurance broker. Oftentimes, independent insurance brokers sell insurance for many different companies and tend to be less biased, because some insurance companies try to soak you up. You probably experienced this when getting car insurance when you're under 25. You can learn more about business insurance by visiting this link on the slide. Hitchcock's Insurance is the world's largest insurer of small businesses, on business in general. They are a sponsor of the America Small Business Development Center Conference. They offer insurance coverage, but they offer this website, hitchcocks.com/SBDC, as a knowledge base for our clients, SBDC clients, on the differences between each type of business insurance, what you need, what you might need as a certain employer, and the top 5 steps for purchasing small business insurance. They also have these videos. What is general liability insurance? What is small business insurance? What is professional liability insurance? And as a small business owner, you're going to need insurance one way or another, and eventually. So the more information you can get about it, the better. And remember, those independent insurance brokers tend to be less biased, and they're often small business owners too. So make sure to support your community. Let's go back to our slideshow. Take a breath. We covered all 13 steps in this webinar, and it's only about 12:30. We're doing good. Next, I want to show you guys some of the no-cost research tools available to you, and some of the research tools available to you specifically as an SBDC client. So the first 4 are free. They're available to you and the public. The ones I have bolded: IBIS World, Reference USA, and Demographics Now are databases that the Small Business Development Center pays a lot of money to have access to. If you were to buy a report from one of these databases, it would cost you upwards of $800. So if you do one thing as an SBDC client, if you want to make an appointment with your SBDC advisor to pull one of these reports, I think it's well worth your time and your tax dollars. So let me describe to you what each of the free ones do. The first link is a great 30-minute webinar from the SBA's website on how to write a business plan. And they also provide great worksheets and examples of financial projections. So I want to go to this one because they recently changed up how they're offering their learning modules on their website. And they have one specifically for the women on the call. It's called Ascent. And men could take it too. I watched the webinar about the launch for the Ascent program. I don't know if this link isn't cooperating because it changed, or because the internet's not that fast right now. But I will put a note to change the SBA link, and I'll chat it to you right now. So if you go to the SBA website, it's sba.gov, and they have a learning platform here. I click on the learning platform. And here we see Ascent for Women, and then we see the Learning Center. If you're a woman, take advantage of that Ascent. It's a really good program. It was started by our former SBA administrator, Ms. Carazan. We have a new administrator. Her name is Ms. Guzman. They're both women of color, and they are dedicated to helping minorities and women start and succeed in small business. So under this, we have plan, launch, manage, and under plan, how to write a business plan. I have actually taken this, even though it says I'm only on step 1, I've taken all 22. And they're small videos. They take around, that says 31 seconds, but it takes me around a minute or 2 to watch each of these videos. And then at the bottom, they have those great worksheets that I talked about on financial statements. And then they have the how to write a business plan checklist. If you need a business loan, if you're going to start a new venture and want to do the research in a practical and structured way, do a business plan. Just do a business plan. Our executive state director always says that we have definitive proof that those businesses who write a business plan do about 30% better than those who don't. So, consider that. I love working with people to write a business plan. I'm going to send you the business plan template that I like to use in the follow-up email. And take this webinar. It's great information. Okay. The second link is for bplans.com by Palo Alto Software. I mentioned earlier that they have an online business planning software called LifePlan. But they used to sell their business plan examples on a disc back in the day for about $300. And now, since they have the LifePlan, they're offering all their business plan examples for free at bplans.com. They also have some great other great resources on that site, like startup cost calculators and whatnot. The third link is for Census Business Builder, and this is a no-cost database that allows you to find demographic information about your customers, census stats about your businesses in your industry, and estimates of yearly household expenditures in certain categories. I will show you this one, and it's one of my favorites. The last link is for the Middle Rio Grande Council of Governments Interactive Traffic Counts map. And this allows you, at least in the Middle Rio Grande, so most of us are here from Albuquerque Metro. They will allow you to click, it's a map, and you could click on a stretch of road. And if they do collect traffic counts for that stretch of road, you could see what the average weekday and the average daily traffic counts are. So I will show you some of the paid databases because those are well worth your time and taxpayer dollars to take advantage of. And I will show you Census Business Builder. But it is, because it is my favorite. It is one of my favorites. So if you're in a rural area, the small business edition's good for you because you're in a place with maybe 1 or 2 zip codes. If you are in a city, the regional analyst edition's pretty good for you. I'm going to show you small business edition, and I'm going to show it to you for restaurants. And if you are in a certain industry, they sort their information by NAICS or NIAC codes. If you need to know your NAICS or NIAC code, you could get that off the census's website, or you could contact your SBDC counselor. We have to put those in your file, so we should know what they are. We could search for this demographic information by city, state, county, zip code, census tract. I like to do it by zip code or city. We're going to use Belen as an example today. And let's create this report so I could demonstrate to you the value of this report. It's vital for business planning, and it's free. It's free. So here it gives you the demographic characteristics about that zip code. This is great for planning because if I've sold things that were, maybe I put a children's toy store, I'd probably want to know how many children are in that area, and it looks like 5% in Belen. Here's the socioeconomic characteristics. If I wanted to start a retail outlet in a place, I would probably want to look for an estimated household income at or above the national average. Belen happens to be a little bit below, but that does not mean there's not room for small business in Belen. This gives us housing characteristics. So for my tradespeople on the call, my contractors, plumbers, this gives you information about the median household value of a housing unit in Berlin. It's gone up dramatically over the past 10 years. And the median year the structure was built. This is the zip code. This isn't the city of Berlin. So this is the 87002 zip code, which will include unincorporated areas of Berlin. So we're looking at a wider scope than just Berlin. Berlin proper, that is. And then my favorite part of this, and the most useful in my opinion, is total household expenditures per year in certain categories. So this will tell you in the 87002 zip code, it looks like per household per year, the expenditure is $264.79 on men's apparel. So these are all interesting stats and very valuable to you starting off a business. Oh, let's go back. Let's go to Census Business Builder once more. And then we're going to navigate to the UNM library. You don't have access to this as a person of the public. You'd have to make an appointment with your advisor to go over this information. But I want to show you IBIS World because it's my favorite paid database. And we'll use restaurants as an example because there's lots of information about restaurants. If you have the information, again, is listed by NAICS or NIAC codes. So if you need that code, ask your advisor. They also go by keywords, so I'm able to find a lot of interesting reports in this database. So some of the high notes about these reports. So the first part I like to cover are the key external drivers. I like to call these the key economic drivers too. So what drives the single location restaurant industry? Consumer spending, consumer confidence index, healthy eating index, households earning more than $100,000. Very important to know. That's your target market right there. And an urban population. It tells you who your suppliers are, tells you who your buyers are. And this gives you a deeper dive into which of your expenditures are growing. This one was done in February of this year, and it shows that most of these drivers are growing. Sometimes they venture a guess of how the industry is going to do over 5 years. They haven't been doing that because probably of COVID-19, the economy is uncertain. And we could see profit margin, 4%. So this tells me that 4 cents out of every dollar goes into the business's revenue. This means you're serving people on a large scale. You're like a factory. You want more product, you sell, the more profit you make. This tells you the biggest service product or service segmentations across the US in your industry. So let's see what wins. It looks like Asian restaurants win in the single location full service restaurant category. So if I was going to start a business, I didn't know what kind of restaurant I wanted to start. This is a good guide. US restaurants is a close second. Burgers, of course, we love our burgers. Here's you might hear about the V-shaped recovery in the news. This just basically says that the economy tanked in 2020 and is projected to do better in 2021 and 2022, and then even out over the years between 2020 and 2026 to where we were before COVID-19. This gives you an idea of where your industry is in the business life cycle. Full service, single location, full service restaurants happen to be in the quality growth segment. If I was going to start a new business, I'd probably want to be in the quality or quantity growth segments. Mature businesses are those businesses that have been around for 8 years or more. So you're competing against more established businesses. And businesses in the decline mean there are going to be more businesses going out of business than starting up. There's our product and service segmentation again. And what I'm looking for now is the major markets. So this report will help us identify where is our target market, what are their characteristics. So this happens to be for single location, full service restaurants. We want to target those areas with households earning more than $100,000 per year. And remember, we could find that out on Census Business Builder. We could also research that on Demographics Now and in IBIS World, or Data Excel as it's called now. And then it goes through all the other major markets. But if I were a restaurant, I would want to structure myself in a place where there was a high concentration of individuals earning more than $100,000 per year. So those are the high points of that. Let's go back to our slideshow. Since this is a COVID-19 sponsored webinar, I want to go over the most up-to-date and accurate links for getting information about operating your business in COVID-19. The first is for the New Mexico Department of Health's COVID Safe Practices for all employers. The second is for the New Mexico Safe Certified Program. The third is for OSHA's guidance on preparing the workplace for COVID-19. The fourth is for the CDC's COVID-19 information. That's the Center for Disease Control. The fifth is for the EEOC's article on what you should know about the ADA, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act, and other EEO laws. So if you are an employer, read this. I think it's the most important. And here's a link for newmexico.gov, and this gives you the latest information about COVID-19 in our state and provides links for information related to small business grant and funding opportunities. Perfect. Now that we talked about how we can help you, this is how you could help the SBDC. As part of offering our services, we need your help to ensure our services are around for many more years. So we ask that you participate in our surveys, report economic impacts because of our assistance, and write a letter of support to your local legislators about your experience with the Small Business Development Center. All information is kept confidential and is only reported in aggregate to our funders, the state of New Mexico, and the Small Business Administration. Now I want to show you some great helpful links to other programs under our umbrella. So this provides contact information for the SBDC programs, PTAC, IBA, and New Mexico Tech's Technology Commercialization Accelerator. The Procurement Technical Assistance Program, or PTAC, is a government-funded program providing assistance to small businesses who want to sell their goods or services to the government, educational institutions, or tribal entities. The International Business Accelerator is a one-stop shop of resources for New Mexican businesses and individuals wishing to introduce their product or services into the global market. And the New Mexico Tech Technology Commercialization Accelerator offers no-cost confidential counseling regarding intellectual property. And that's staffed by the newest member of our team, Stefanita Rawlings. And they can't give legal advice, but they could give you insights into researching those patents and trademarks. This site continues the list of small business resource partners. Here we mentioned the Service Corps of Retired Executives, or SCORE, WEST, or the Women's Business Center Program, and VBOC, the Veterans Business Outreach Center. Here's the contact information for your small business support team. We are funded by the SBA, and many people ask about SBA loans. So here's a link to the SBA's resource guide. And this is a PDF guide. It's put together by the SBA usually once a year. And it outlines the services provided by the SBA. And on page 27, are all the SBA lenders. And a lot of us hear about SBA loans, but really what the SBA does is they provide a guarantee to a bank. So they act kind of like Uncle Sam as a co-signer. So they make a bank loan look more appealing to the lender for the small business owner. And it's geared towards people, minorities and veterans and women and Native Americans. And most of us on the call today, we are just starting out. So the main lenders you should consider are the non-for-profit lenders or the alternative lenders. And these are the lenders that typically do micro loans, so loans under $50,000. And they're usually the only lenders that consider a new business start. So here, the major ones to look at are DreamSpring, the Loan Fund, and West. These are going to be your major lenders who will consider a new business start. And if you want to learn more about the programs that the SBA, the funding programs that they offer, right after the lenders on page 33 are the different types of loans. Perfect. We got through that with time to spare, you guys. We're doing pretty good. So this concludes our slideshow, and I'll answer questions in the Q&A. And I want to thank you again for spending time with me today. I really enjoyed it.
You have a lot of questions to get through.
And Leslie, if you have anything you want to say, go ahead and address the group.
I want to say again is that this presentation with Chris is just to give you lots of homework, because he gives you so many links and so many ways to find the information that you need. So it's always great because he does send the presentation slides out to you. So if you didn't catch a link or you're unsure, you will be getting that. We also have his presentation on demand, pre-recorded. It goes up on our website for 7 days after this presentation. And then we put it on our YouTube channel. So there's all kinds of ways to capture that information you need for your businesses.
Perfect. Thank you, Leslie. So the first question I see is, if your financial potential was from overseas and you can prove it. I was overseas and came back because of COVID-19. So international trade has changed with the last presidential administration. It's going to change with this new presidential administration, and it's changed drastically because of COVID-19. In the news, they call this the supply chain disruption. I'm not sure what the question is there, but yeah, there are things to consider with that. And there's a comment, nobody answers the phone at the Secretary of State's office contact number. I need to register my company. Well, let me tell you, even I have problems getting through to people at the Secretary of State's office. They're not doing any paper, they're not taking any paperwork at all. So if you need to register or incorporate a business, you have to do it totally online. And if you go to their website, they have an area called online services, and then they have the business portal. You have to create an account and log in, and then you have to upload money for whatever you want to do. If you want to do an LLC, it's about $51. If you don't upload that money first, you'll have to do everything all over again when you go to pay. So make sure to upload that money for the specific thing you want to do. And then all the forms, if you're going to do an LLC, they're called articles of organization, are available online. And if you're going to incorporate their articles of incorporation. So I hope this helps maybe resolve your problem a little bit, but yeah, you're right. I have issues getting through to the New Mexico Secretary of State's office. Let's see. Vandever, what about using a DBA? My company name is long, but it's easier to abbreviate in the logo. You could use a DBA, and the only place to declare a DBA is when you apply for an employer identification number and when you get your business license with the municipality. But that doesn't help you keep that name at the state level, and it certainly doesn't help you keep that name at the federal level. And if you're going to do something like have a website, and instead of being the Small Business Development Center, you want to be SBDC.org, the only way to know is to explore trademarks. And usually the abbreviations or the acronyms are always taken. They're very popular. And it's going to take a little bit of research. You may want to consult with an attorney on that one. Does the death have to be registered with the death of a corporation? Yes, you have to dissolve the corporation with the Secretary of State's office for sure. Evelyn asks, will this webinar be recorded and available afterwards? It is still frequently patchy or freezy for me. Yes, it is available on the YouTube channel. And I'll show you that link after let me show you that link now. There it is right there. It looks like I'm a very popular YouTube star, at least in the small business, New Mexico small business world here. Let's see. Here, let me chat over this. Oh, actually, I want to go to the full channel, because that's where all the videos are. Perfect. Chat over this link for everybody.
At America's SBDC New Mexico.
Perfect. Okay. Do I need to get unemployment insurance if it's just me? No, I don't believe you do, but you might want to consult with the Department of Workforce Solutions before to get a definitive answer on that one. And this one. So I need a business license and business permit when I operate in different areas, or do I just need a permit? So if you're a home-based business and you're doing business, say in Belen, and you're going to do business out of your home, your transactions are going to happen in Belen, then you would just need a business license in Belen. If you are if you're going to travel, if you're going to do a pop-up shop, say your business address is in Belen, but you're going to operate a business in Albuquerque, you would need to get a temporary or full business permit in Albuquerque. Just depends where you're physically going to conduct commerce, and it depends on your industry as well. Let's see, would you mind showing the slide with women resources? Thank you. Sure. There, I believe this is it with the one for the Women's Business Center, or is it the one from the SBA.gov? Tell me, Chantel. Oh, DBA, not death. There's no formal DBA registration process at the state level, only when you're getting your business license, and then it becomes a legal matter. So if you're going to use a DBA, I would really consider consulting with a patent or trademark attorney, because the paperwork can be a real bear for getting that trademark later on. Perfect, thank you. Oh, an LLC. So you need to know how much to pay for an LLC. It's like $50 and some change. So I would put $52. I think when you log on, when I've done it before, it gives you options. It asks you what you need to pay for, and then it gives you a total of how much you need to upload from your card. So it's like $51.62, something, a weird amount like that. But make an appointment with your counselor, because they have expertise and they could sit with you as you do the online paperwork. Okay, perfect. This is the correct slide you need. Perfect. I'm with you guys for another 5 minutes. I'm happy to answer any more questions you might have. Let me look in the chat, see if anything got chatted over. And Leslie, if you have any questions that I'm not sure of, please let me know.
Okay, you're picking up the chat. I think there was a question that had come through.
Okay, let's see. How does the state CRS apply to tribal members having a business on the reservation? Oh, I addressed this a little bit. This is the first time I've ever seen gross receipts tax rates on the schedule for reservations. They're gonna, in July, they're changing the way gross receipts tax is calculated. Let me stop share 1 second and I'll bring up that email. So the economic, we sent out this as a midweek update, but the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department and the New Mexico Economic Development Department are having a webinar on the 23rd. And let me chat over the web version of this update to everybody on the call. I don't want to venture to give any advice about gross receipts tax because everything's changing. I'm going to learn along with you on the 23rd. And if you have any specific questions regarding gross receipts tax, please address them during that webinar or at one of the webinars offered to new businesses or new employers. Let's see, my appointment's for the 26th, but I need this registration for a federal register. Comment I have to send with my registration and EIN number. I was put up my comments. The 26th. So Leslie, if this a particular attendee emails you, could you connect them with a business advisor that might be able to see them before the 26th?
Absolutely. If you'd like to go ahead and email me, and I will type my email address into the chat. I know you get a lot of emails from me about registration and stuff, but let me put it in real quick and let me see if I can get some help for you.
Leslie's good with that. And if she doesn't get a response, let me tell you, Leslie will go keep emailing. And if not, she'll go to, we have a meeting with our bosses on Tuesday and Thursday. And she'll make sure the boss knows that this person needs to get with an advisor. You're tough, Leslie, when it comes to that.
I do like to send the emails, but I'll be glad to see if I can get you connected. So definitely email me.
Perfect. Let's see, just trying to clarify, I'm a home-based business. I plan on getting a business license in San Juan. My business allows me to travel, so I need a business license and business permit or just a permit. It depends on what you're doing. So if you sold physical products, you might have a home-based business, but you're going to different places to sell physical products because these laws in the municipalities and counties were created in the 1910s and 20s, and they govern businesses like traveling salesmen, traveling carnivals, revivals, things like that. Oh, I see, it's drones, yeah, drone services. I would address this particular question to the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department because getting business licenses, the municipality, they don't know too much about this stuff. They just handle the paperwork and they're going to tell you, yes, you need a business license wherever you operate. But it really just depends on where you're going to be taxed, where you have to pay gross receipts tax. So I would address this particular question to the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. And I would do it during their new business webinar or during the webinar on the 23rd. But if you're a drone service, my suspicion is you'd only have to get a business license in your home address, and then you would pay gross receipts tax based on that address. If you're a contractor, if you're a door-to-door salesperson, if you're a pop-up shop and you're going to do business off of a particular business address in that municipality, then you'd have to get a business license. Full or temporary. Hope that clarifies it a little bit better for you. And then let's see, I got a question. Is there a service with webinar presentation help? I'm not sure what kind of webinar presentation help you might need, but if you go to one of the major, whoops, that's telling me it's going to click. If you go to the major companies that offer webinar services, like Zoom, they often have a blog. And let me tell you, Leslie could probably attest to this. We work with another person, her name is Anna Lena, and we are constantly looking up things in the blog or in the data in the information database on how to do different things in Zoom. And they're very informative. A lot of times there are videos.
There is.
There
Also, oh, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, listen. I'm going to chat that over to everybody.
I think they do have a lot of good resources to help. And also, we have Eric Spellman coming up this week. It's not quite the same topic, but he is very good at presentation and marketing. And also he gave a couple presentations. They're on our YouTube, but he gave some presentations that might give you some insight also. It is how to create a YouTube video. And I know it's a little bit different than what you're talking about, but it's kind of the same lines on how you're presenting yourself, because the YouTube videos is kind of the same thing as doing a webinar presentation. And so I would suggest go to our YouTube channel and look for the one presentation that he has on creating YouTube videos. That kind of gives you a little oversight into kind of the same topic. So that might help also.
Perfect. Thank you, Leslie. I didn't even think about that. I'm so glad you mentioned those. Two other great resources for that actually have, like, if you need the technical assistance, like you need the equipment and maybe somebody guiding you or doing it for you. The Arrowhead Center out of New Mexico State University is a great resource. And it's a great resource for all entrepreneurs, but they have their specific services for getting business owners online and help with advertising. So let me chat over their information to you. And then with the Women's Business Center, or West, they recently got a grant from Comcast and they have a digital studio. I haven't got to take a tour. Hint, hint to anybody on the call who knows West or is with West. I would love a tour of the studio. But they actually rent out studio space. So if you needed a professional space to make an advertisement, create a professional video, they actually have that space available for you. And it's men and women. West does business with both. Agnes Nunian is actually the who brought West to New Mexico, and she's a wealth of information. Well, thank you all for attending. It's just after 1. I want to respect your time. I want to thank you for spending time with me today. And Leslie, if you have any closing remarks, go right ahead.
You always put me on the spot. I just want to remind everyone that we're here to help you. We're here to help you in your small business. And like I said already, he gives you plenty of homework. So if you run into any kind of problems or want more information on any of the stuff that Chris went over today, let us know and we'll be glad to get the information to you.
Big thanks to you, Leslie, for being such a good coordinator. Thank you, everybody on the call today. If you don't need me, Leslie, we could end the call.
All right. See you next time.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.